going to hand over now to Peder. Peder, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Thank you for the invitation, and welcome to everyone. Well, as you say, been on the ground, not physically because of the many restrictions, but I've obviously spoken to our people across our network, and would like to share with you what we have experienced over the last months or so. Of course, in Q4, we saw a lot of stockpiling taking place, particularly in the month of December, covering parts, could be food, could be beverages, household items, construction material, pretty much a very wide variety of goods. And of course, with the French border closing in December, that created a chaotic situation in Dover. But it didn't really delay much of the import to the UK because of the timing. Most of the trucks that were caught were on their way back to the continent. But due to the full stocks, we've seen much lower volumes in the first 2 weeks of January. But again, partly because of the full stock, and the lack of haulage capacity that we still experience in the UK, port terminals are congested as import units were not picked up in time. The good news is, however, that no vessels have been stopped. Traffic is actually operating according to schedule everywhere, but with very huge differences from route to route and port to port. Probably much to the surprise of many, the channel ports have worked pretty well. We have, of course, seen a few units being turned away because of missing paperwork or low quality of paperwork, but generally everything has been functioning well when it comes to ferry traffic and the tunnel traffic for the crossing of the channel. This is, of course, one of the reasons is the driver is present, can help. He can call back home and get the needed information. But also the systems have been working. They were tested, as many of you know, in advance. And interestingly enough, the channel ports are the only one that remain and have remained green on our dashboard since January 1. Unaccompanied traffic, and the one where we take unaccompanied trailers across the North Sea, have experienced a lot of difficulties, very many different difficulties. Despite the lower volumes, there's been a severe hit due to very low quality of paperwork in many instances. Systems have not worked properly. It may be the systems of the ferry operators, but also those of the forwarders, or indeed of the authorities. And then again, the links between those systems have not worked properly everywhere. That has caused, as you can imagine, a huge amount of manual work to be performed by every link in that particular chain. Huge challenges still we see on the continent and in Scandinavia to clear export documentation as well as import documentation. And the latter has caused congestions in port terminals also on the European Union side as well. Customs authorities have in general been very helpful, been very flexible on both sides, and we're very grateful for that, because otherwise I'm afraid the systems would have completely broken down. A few concrete examples from our logistics division. We carry a lot of fish from Scotland and take that to the European continent. Often that is based on part loads, which means this requires information from several shippers, leading to much manual work. Very complicated to compile the information and to get it across. It requires the issuing of transport documents, of health certificates to get the units on the road. And when arriving again, release of transit documents and those guarantees associated with issuing the transport documents. A number of delays causing need for additional guarantee amounts, much work going into guiding customers what and how to fill in. And we have a shared service center, as many do, having had to work night and day to cope with the complicated work associated with this. A few words on the Irish situation as well. We've seen that the normally very busy central corridor connecting the Republic of Ireland with the UK has dropped as much as 75% in volume during early weeks of January compared to same period last year. And that, of course, we've seen the traffic then either moving north, going to Northern Ireland, or indeed moving to the direct services between typically the port of Rosslare, Cherbourg in France, Dunkirk in France, or Zeebrugge in Belgium. Whether and to which extent this will continue is, of course, hard to say. We believe that this is obviously partly because of Brexit and the complications associated with that, but obviously also the COVID-19 situation and the restrictions for traveling and the risk, of course, for people's health. So much more capacity has been added to the services connecting the Republic of Ireland with the continent, and so far we and others have been able to cope with the situation. So this completes my quick presentation or report from real life. Many different challenges across. We have seen quality of work, paperwork improving day by day. And I think it's safe to say that going into February, most of the systems will be working okay. And as the quality also improves, I believe that we will also be able to cope with the additional volumes that will come, hopefully so, come February. Thank you very much, Gareth.
So, Peder, it seems like we have lost Gellert for a second, so I'm sure he will join in a second again. So maybe we should just get the discussion going.
Let's do so. I will continue from here and then welcome our three panelists. Sarah Riding from Gowling in Birmingham, along with Tyge Rasmussen from Danish Kromann Reumert, and Tue Goldschmieding from Gorrissen Federspiel in Denmark as well. Welcome to the three of you.
Thank you, Peder.
Thank you.
To appearing as well. Now, for the specialists to get going, we already gathered a few questions from the participants to today's webinar, and one of the questions that come up is the following: will the EU road package apply to international road transport to and from the UK going forward? Who of you would like to answer that question? If any. Do we have do we have Tyge with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Would you like to give it a shot?
I can do that, but to be honest, the road package is not my specific area of expertise. But I understand that in the agreement of 44th December, which was now dated 31st of January, so December, there are certain rules both on road trafficking and also air traffic. And to my understanding, the agreement contains some regulation on how many trips you can make in each country, and it applies on both sides of the border. And I can't remember the exact figure if it's two rides you can have on the country, but it is a limitation compared to the regulation that was in place before. But still, you could say in a matter that should work in the practical world. So Peter, with that bit abstract answer, I think that's the best shot I can do from here.
Thank you very much, Tyge. Another question that has come up is also the question of sharing data. Very important to have a supply chain working seamlessly is, of course, the sharing of data. Can we go on doing that as seamlessly as we did before? I think that would be Tyge being able to help us here.
Yeah, thank you, Peder. Well, I guess the answer is we can do that for now. So there are two aspects to it, and the first aspect is the provision of the digital services that are actually used to transfer and share data cross-border, and the TCA does allow for the continuation of provision of those kind of services. And an important part here is that as part of the TCA, there's a requirement that authorizations cannot be required for actually providing these services merely due to the fact that they are online services. Further on, the TCA goes on to ensure that the member states in the UK as well cannot set up any requirements for using facilities, computer facilities or network facilities located particular in a member state or in the UK. So there is sort of the basis for continuing to provide the online services. And then, of course, there's the important part, the data that we are actually using in the supply chain and that we're continuing to use in a even broader manner. And in particular with that, for that question, the restrictions on transfer of personal data is quite important. And under the EU GDPR rules, any transfer of personal data outside the European Union is restricted, and all countries outside the EU, more or less, except for a few countries, are considered unsafe, so to speak. And of course, in the light of Brexit, then the question becomes: is the UK then going to be considered an unsafe third country, and how can we continue to transfer data? But as part of the TCA, there's a sort of an interim model where we'll continue to be able to transfer data as we have done previously to the UK until 1st of July. And the reason for this transition period is that during this period, the European Commission is working on whether it's able to adopt an adequacy decision in terms of the UK, which means that the UK will be considered a safe third country, to the effect that we can transfer personal data to the UK as we do with any other EU member state. So, well, that was a long explanation for a short answer, which is yes, we can continue, but we need to be aware of the 1st of July end date, and while everybody's working hard to get the adequacy decision in place, it's not decided yet, and there are some implications in that respect. We might come back to that a little later, perhaps. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I saw there are questions coming in or comments. I didn't get a chance to note it down. Can anyone help me here on this from the from the organizers, or otherwise we'll just jump to the next question, or we could ask
Peter, allow me to come in. Gunnar here.
Yes,
there was a add-on to Ture's reply here from Gareth. Do you expect adequacy to be greater in the time allowed? And as I understand it, this can also be withdrawn at a quite short notice. So, question and a comment.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, first of all, the concerns regarding the adequacy decision very much has to do with a decision that was made by the European Court of Justice this summer. Some might have heard of it. It's called Schrems 2, which regards to the transfer of data to the US. And as part of that decision, there were some concerns regarding the security agency's access to personal data when it was transferred into the US. And of course, some of the same concerns have been raised in respect of the UK, but in contrast, you can say there's not much that has changed in that respect. We have transferred data to the UK for many years with the same security services as are active today. So it's going to be difficult in that light to say that things have changed a lot. But it is perhaps the biggest uncertainty in respect of whether it'll be possible to adopt the adequacy decision. As far as I've sort of managed to learn, I think the authorities are looking at this, that they're working quite hard. The ambition and the expectation is that the adequacy decision will be passed before the deadline, but along with that, a new set of what's called standard contractual clauses are actually being passed, which are data transfer agreements that are being passed right now. So they will, in any case, be ready for transfer of data if we don't manage to get the adequacy decision in place before the deadline, and that can then in turn help to maintain the transfers. But again, I think it's an area where you need to stay focused and keep up with what is happening, because it's gonna happen relatively fast, and we have to react relatively fast.
Thank you very much, Tue. And talking about keeping an eye to what's going on, what steps can businesses put in place across their supply chain? I mean, including contractually to ensure that we create a more robust way of dealing with the changes, or indeed to create a competitive advantage. Is that something Sarah could comment?
Yeah, most certainly. I think we've already mentioned that obviously all of this is coming on the back of disruption already caused by COVID. And I think what we've been seeing is that pandemic had already urged many organisations, of course, to look in depth and start restructuring their supply chains. So we've seen a bit of a trend, recently in more transparency, more flow of information to try and avoid, delays. And the process very much needs to carry on now to ensure supply chains can deal with the new import and export requirements. And all elements of a supply chain should be supporting each other in this. Collaboration is absolutely key, and where we're seeing, successful supply chains, it's where there is that real transparency, working together to build that resilience and adaptability. And also, obviously, this is really key where it's a just-in-time supply chain. Obviously, many sectors operate in that way. So the additional requirements, delays, absolutely critical, to the production processes and products where there's a short shelf life. I think where we're seeing competitive advantage is where, suppliers or customers may look to switch to those organisations that are prepared. So it's looking at ways of inbuilding things into your contracts and supply chains in order to put you in that best preferential position, really. So it's things such as, when you're negotiating contracts, looking at things like Incoterms, discussing and agreeing where the goods will be delivered, who arranges transport, who's handling and paying for insurance, who's handling customs procedures. Obviously, much depends on negotiation position, and where the risk is best allocated. Looking really in depth across the supply chain about where the effect of disruption at ports and border crossing points will most hit an organisation. What will that mean in terms of delay and cost? The more admin required, who's having responsibility for that, really drilling down into the whole supply chain. It's that cliche really that a supply chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So just making sure it's really tied up. Other things to do is looking at it really closely, identifying those areas of critical exposure, understanding the origin of parts, obviously the whole rule of origin issue. Again, transparency is key there. Record keeping is absolutely critical. IT systems implementation, we've seen a lot of clients who have been trying to reduce the admin burden, making themselves more efficient. Again, that can be giving competitor advantage if they've got, IT systems which are really dealing with this. Liaising with your critical suppliers, your customers, to identify issues, and working out how you will fulfill all of these new requirements really. So I think overall it's just building in that transparency, making sure that the contracts are working for you, so really drilling down into those issues. And again, it's just identifying the weakest points where these issues can be addressed.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I see Tyge is raising his hand for a comment.
Yes, and I agree with the points Sarah made, and I think you can say that the two main focus areas should be in place now. First is, as Sarah said, the governance structure. You need to have the administration in place, and you need to have mapped your supply chain to understand where do we have any exposure towards a Brexit one way or the other. And right now we see a lot of information and news flow of examples where people get surprised. I guess maybe some of you had read about Marks and Spencer. I think it was called Piggy Percy or something. Some of the product they had developed, produced in Germany, and then they repacked it in UK, and then sold it on to Northern Ireland to find out that this is not the right way to do stuff, because then it's actually subject to customs, because the processing in UK was not enough to kind of transform the product so that it was within the caveats to the tariffs and quotas applying. So basically map your supply chain and find out where there is an exposure towards Brexit one way or the other. And then the next thing, I completely agree on the contracts that they of course should be in made probably. And one thing I just wanted to stress out in addition to Sarah, you mentioned it, but I just wanted to re-emphasize it, is that's the requirements for products, because right now and markings right now and as of today the product requirements are very similar. But in time they may develop differently. So that means that if you have a product which meets all legal requirements within the EU, it might not meet the requirements in UK and vice versa. So there is a risk that those requirements may change, and therefore I would at least try to handle a change in law clause, have that incorporated in the contract, or at least discuss or make clear that if you make an offer, then it's based on the legal requirements in EU, which if you're based in EU, or if you're based in UK, then your offer and price is based on UK. So you at least have some safeguard when doing that. And then the same go, of course, for the markings. Right now, the CE marking is recognized in UK as well, and it's running until 1st of January 2022. But that might change as well, and then you might need to go through, if you are an EU exporter to UK, go through a new process to have the proper UK marking in place, and that, of course, is also a cost you need to incorporate in your pricing, and so. There's a lot of layers into that, and it comes down to find out and start to find out where am I exposed to Brexit, and what does it imply to me on the processes.
Thank you, Tyge. Tue also has a comment, please.
Yeah, this is just to follow up sort of from the digital perspective. One of the things that companies can definitely also use this period for until 1st of July is to get a better understanding of which parts of the supply chain are actually processing data, and in particular, if there are any suppliers who have or who engage what we call sub-processors. So basically subcontractors that are processing personal data, but getting a picture, a better understanding of how those the data processing chains actually work in relation to the supply chain is a good exercise to go through now, to be able to react to whatever outcome will be of the adequacy decision.
I would like everyone on this call to use the raise my hand functionality if they have any comments or questions to the topics that are being discussed. Feel free to raise your hands. While we're waiting for more questions coming up, one of the topics that we have been asked a couple of times, what are the new obligations related to the rules of origin, and how do you think this affects different sectors? Could I ask Sarah to possibly comment on that?
Yes, of course. So obviously goods traded between the EU and UK must meet the rule of origin. It's not a new concept. It's obviously something that's been, in place for a while, but obviously it now applies to the trading between the EU and UK and is critical. And that means that if they meet the rule of origin requirement, they obviously benefit from, being duty and quota free. And in very general terms, this is where the products originate from and not where they have been produced or manufactured. And the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, so the TCA, sets out how the rules of origin operate, as well as very product-specific rules. And this can vary enormously. So, for example, for electric vehicles, 40%, it has to be, 40% of UK EU parts to qualify, and that would increase to 45% by 2026. And it will only apply to products that are wholly obtained, such as mineral products, products which are produced exclusively from materials originating in the territory, or produced in the territory incorporating materials from outside of the UK or the European Union, where they satisfy the very specific product rules. Parts used by UK manufacturers that originate from the EU will also have a cumulative effect and will count towards the relative origin thresholds. And this is obviously equally applying for EU manufacturers using UK products. And then in addition, there are exceptions to the rules described as tolerances that allow non-originating products to be treated as tariff-free in certain situations. And as I say, although it's not a new concept, it now has a more substantial role to play. Boris was applying to get diagonal culmination, which would have included components for third countries where the EU and the UK both had trade agreements, but that can't be counted, so that wasn't included. But we do have bilateral culmination, which captures not just the value of materials, but also processes. So it's very important really to get, the data together, work out the origin, look at the classification and commodity codes and the customs values. It's obviously got, cost implications in terms of compliance, in terms of doing this. Obviously lots more admin there, but those costs are obviously not as significant as the tariffs would have been if we'd have got to that no deal scenario.
So you don't think that it's really going to affect much of the trade going on because of the cost, as it's primarily admin costs that will be applied to it?
I just think in the early stages, there's obviously a lot of unknowns. So it's a lot of, as we spoke about before, the transparency through the supply chain, figuring out the rules, trying to see how they're working in practice. So there's an awful lot of cost in terms of, the admin and the compliance costs of doing that. But I think as if we'd have, gone to a more tariff-based situation, the cost there would have been much more significant. This is much of a bedding in process, getting the processes in place, organisations. It's all very new to a lot of companies and businesses. So it's getting those processes in place now, but hopefully that will bed out in the future. Obviously, again, it's very complicated rules, so it's a lot of organisations having to get advice on that as well, which is obviously increasing time, delays and cost. But ultimately, hopefully, when this has been playing out for a while, it will be something that becomes more ingrained throughout the supply chain. And again, it's building in all of these processes in with suppliers, with customers to make the process more seamless going forward.
There is, of course, a risk that we'll see less trade because of these complications being added, because of the costs being also applied to it. Do you believe in sort of the same level of trade, or do you see sort of a more localized supply chain coming out of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question, isn't it? I think, again, we've spoken about COVID a few times already, with all the delays and the problems throughout the supply chain with the impact of COVID. A lot of organisations are already looking at a more localised supply chain. The problem is, of course, that's not viable for resources. I think organisations will have to find their way through this. I think there's been a big rationalisation of supply chains with people looking at, maybe better ways of doing it, looking at the most cost-effective way, shortening supply chains in some instances. But I think that's not just a knock-on effect of this, it's a knock-on effect of, the other things that have been happening due to COVID. But I think, there's also the mutual recognition with things such as the trusted trader status, the agreements to facilitate roll-on, roll-off traffic, such as at Dover. So there are mechanisms in place to try and aid this process. So I think organisations, will work through this, find the supply chain that works best for the companies. And of course, as I say, for a lot of product supply, it's not viable to have that short localised supply in place in any event.
Good news for the transport industry, I guess. So thank you very much, Sarah. Now, and as you rightfully say, I mean, Brexit is one thing, the COVID-19 impact is another, and it may be difficult to sort of distinguish between the impacts of the two. But now, once we get to travel again and to meet customers, can we actually carry out our sales work in the same way we used to do going forward, or do we now need work permits to do so? Any comments to that from the panel?
Yeah, I can give some shed some light on this. Yeah, before the agreement, before Brexit, you had, of course, the internal market, and you could travel free, and also as a salesperson and doing out services, carrying out services without any particular requirements throughout the European Union. And this is not continuing after Brexit. Then there's an agreement that you try to recognize each other's professions and like that. But also in traveling, you need to distinguish between if you have like what you can say a short-term residence and you are traveling with a business purpose at mind, then you need to adhere to the local regulation which is in place in each country, and that is different between Denmark and UK. They don't have the same rules here. And to my understanding, in UK, if you are traveling for short term, staying, that means a stay for less than 6 months, you are allowed to do that without any visa. But if you do travel as a salesperson and would like to go in general to carry out sales to the public, then you need a permit to do that. Whereas if you go travel and in order to negotiate an agreement you're about to enter, that is would not require a visa on the short, if it's a short term. If you then change and say I would like to move to for instance as a EU citizen to UK, then you need to have a settled. I mean, you need a work permit. You need to apply for a pre-settled status. I think it's called. And you can say you have some of the same rules if you go back and then look at Denmark, because it's if you want to move to Denmark for a longer period, then you need to apply for a resident permit. Whereas if you are only traveling to carry out, for instance, negotiating agreements or other ancillary works to so they're, for instance, going and making some research, or if you are to be a speaker at an event, then you can do that if you respect the 90 days within the 180 days. I don't know if maybe people have heard about it, but if you only stay 90 days measured over a 180 days period, then you can do it without any particular permits. If you are to carry out services, then you actually are to apply for a permit to do that. So there are definitely more regulation in place now, and then it comes back to have the administrative function in place to assist, salesperson going abroad and find and check, do I need anything, any permits, how long are going, and stuff like that.
Very good. And Gareth had a specific questions on seafarers working on maintaining wind farms, working on board vessels. Would they require also work permits? They would not go ashore, but they would operate in national waters, maintaining the wind farms outside the UK.
I think from a Danish law perspective, I would need to refer to one of my specialists in this area. I don't know that. I don't know, Sarah, if you have a bit on the UK side.
Yeah, it's not my specialist area either, unfortunately. I'm not sure. It's a very interesting question, though, isn't it? And it's certainly, can certainly feed back if anybody's got a specific, query on that.
Let's we'll save the questions and see if we can have them answered by the specialist required here. Sorry. Right. Thank you. Any more questions from the audience before we slowly move into the individual rooms?
No, Peder, I've been looking at the chat, and we have not received any questions there. If people do have a question, now is the time you can either write it in the chat or raise your hand and then ask your question.
I saw that a couple of questions came up actually as we spoke. For instance, meat products from Thailand arriving in UK and then exported to the EU. Is the health certificate then still valid? Anyone ready to give a shot on that? The specialists remain silent, so
I can certainly. It's one of those. I think the rules are so complicated that some of the very specific queries here we would have to kind of look into in some detail. But happy to take them away and feedback. That's no problem at all.
We'll take them back and then come back on that. Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. But then I think, Garrett, it's time for you to take over and lead us into the separate rooms.
Hello. Good. Yes. Well, first of all, I think thank you to you, Peder, and to the whole panel for the input here. Clearly, we're in early days yet, and we're going to get questions we haven't quite worked the answers out yet to, and we will work on those and try and pick them up from the experts and feed them back. I think a lot of these questions will be so specific to the individual company's situation that you'd have to have specific advice as opposed to a generic answer. As I think Sarah just hinted in terms of the meat products from, I think it was Thailand, wasn't it? But you can take the rest of you that are not on the panel, you can take some of these questions into the breakout rooms now, where you'll be able to have a conversation on camera, on microphone, rather than using the chat function, which you'll probably find much more interactive. So I'm now going to ask Kira to just give the instructions on how the breakout rooms are going to work. But thank you very much to everyone who's been involved and to all the organisations that help put this together. Thanks very much, Kira. Is she there?
Yes, I'm here. I just had all these the breakout rooms are starting messages pop up, so I couldn't find my microphone button. I'm here. So we're now going to go to the breakout session, and in the breakout session, as Gareth said, you can ask questions to the individual lawyers present. I have just posted an enormous amount of links in the chat, so there you should be able to see them. If you can't see them, please inform me, and then I can pass them on to someone else. It's quite simple. You just press a link on the room you want to attend. The name of the room is above the link, so you can see what room you are going to go to. And yes, you just press the link of the room you want to attend, and then you will be transferred to that room where the respective speaker will await. I know Peder will stay in the main room for a little bit if someone should have a question. But beside that, I think it's just time for our speakers, if you all can see the link, to go to your respective room.
Tyge, did you find your way to the room? There you did. Good. Very good. So Peder, we're still in this room, and if there is any specific questions to Peder, or maybe a comment, observations, now is the time to please raise the hand in the function here and unmute yourself, and then let's take the discussion here. See how many are staying in.
Yeah, still quite a lot in the main room.
Yeah. Just take a few minutes for people to disperse into the other rooms. You can see they are on hold now, and move on to the specific rooms.
If you're in the main room and because you don't have any questions for the lawyers, why not join one of the rooms anyway? Because other people will be asking questions, so you'll learn something.
Absolutely, good point. And that's also what we can encourage people to do here, to bring in observations on ways that you have found challenges and to deal with them, or new ways, new business areas that has come from this, because without doubt those are emerged as well. Peder, maybe I can ask you, while people are thinking about it, how have DFDS prepared for all of this yourself as a company? Because you got both port operation and you got ferry operation, and most likely you got other things going on across the North Sea, for that sake, the Irish Sea as well, I believe. How has the experience been for DFDS in this?
Well, we decided sort of to prepare in three different buckets, so to speak. One was on the system side, to make sure that we would have systems in place to be able to communicate with our customers, with the authorities, and indeed to handle custom clearances, issuing of customs documents, and all the rest of it. In the second bucket was really getting ourselves ready in terms of having sufficient and right resources at hand. So we have been hiring two-digit number of new colleagues that have joined us in the various ports, but also in our shared service center in Poznan, Poland, to assist us making all the customs papers. So there has been a steep learning curve, as we basically only started hiring at the latter part of last year and went into training camps. But we succeeded in getting almost as many resources on board as we needed, but we're still hiring. We have also become an attractive place to find custom clearances, customs agents for other customers, for other companies. So there's quite a churn rate in these resources as well. And then finally, it was really also a matter of preparing our customers for this, making sure that everyone understood the new requirements. And as we all know, nobody really knew the requirements until very late. So that was a very difficult task. And that's probably also where we see the biggest challenges, as I mentioned in the beginning, where the paperwork is still lacking in quality. It's still very difficult for many companies, importers and exporters, to comprehend the new rules and to fulfill the requirements. But we're working. We've been working on that. We have had webinars with a number of our customers across the network as well.
For people in this room, if you have any questions, specific or comments, please raise your hand, unmute yourself, or put it in the chat, and we'll facilitate to Peder Gellert here. Peder, so have you become a service provider of advice to your clients and your clients' clients, I guess, as well?
We are. You can say so. We need to make sure that things are working properly. We are as such not selling advice. We're selling custom clearances, custom clearance services. But we are definitely, as part of the service, we are offering to our customers, both our customers to the logistics division and to the ferry division. We are offering advice to our customers. We're offering assistance, and it's really, it has been that big amount of work for our local organizations over the last 3 to 4 weeks to make sure that we keep that dialogue going and we make sure that quality improves. It has been particularly difficult with smaller companies, smaller importers, smaller exporters who doesn't have the let's say the spare resources at hand, where we've had to step in and do a little more than just offering advice, but actually doing the paperwork as well. I see there are some people having problems joining the breakout. I hope it's not a general problem.
Brian, that should be possible. That does take a second or two when you click on one of the links in this chat to the meeting room breakout with Gorrissen, Kromann, Reumert, or Gowling. And then you will be put on hold in this room and go into the other room, but give it a few seconds to do that. Alternatively, copy the link, exit this room altogether, and then restart using that specific link, that specific room you would like to enter and join in. I hope it works.
Thank you very much. I'll try. Thank you.
Please, thank you. Peter, what is your experience in working with the respective governments across the North Sea and their willingness to find ways to maybe not so governments, but the governmental agencies of the customs and other agencies you would need to be in touch with? Are they approachable for, especially maybe the SMEs, to find solutions?
As I mentioned earlier, we've actually experienced a lot of help. We've seen very helpful authorities throughout the first 3 to 4 weeks. Must say, however, that we also see that many of those agencies are now really they've probably been overwhelmed by the number of questions asked. And we have seen some of these governmental agencies now insisting on written questions or written approaches, and we see that answer time may be several days or up to weeks. So I think we have probably now experience some difficulties with the SMEs actually getting the needed assistance. But we're trying with the experience we have then to sort of share what we know and potentially connect them to others, and thereby share the experiences across different industries to make sure that in the interest of all, that things are working slightly better than they have so far. But I think many of the government agencies have difficulties now coping with the demand.
Yeah. We're coming close to the top of the hour here now. If there's any remaining questions or comments, it's a time to post them. We for sure, from the British Chamber of Commerce in Denmark, Gareth, you can see in the picture, and myself, Gunnar Larsen from the Danish-UK Association, we're more than happy to help to facilitate and continue to facilitate where we can to make sure the trade is still going on across the North Sea as much as possible. And maybe we can even grow it. So on that note, maybe I could also highlight that later this week, there will be an economic update from Nordea to how is the UK economy doing. Maybe it's advisable to check in on that as well, to see if it's still worthwhile to chase the business across the UK, or maybe you need to find more business outside of the UK to continue grow the business. You can find more details on that on dkuk.org and sign up for that. Peter, do you have any last comments?
An observation. We have seen volumes started to grow again, which is a good sign. So it doesn't seem that sort of importer-exporters are scared of the situation. So it seems that there is still trade going on, and we are obviously hopeful that, as we discussed earlier, that we can cope with the complicatedness of the situation, and hopefully we get back on track with high numbers again.
That is. Go ahead, Gareth.
If anyone's interested in the performance of the UK in comparison with other countries, there's a really interesting podcast on the BBC called More or Less. It's about statistics, and it's important to understand how statistics are being compiled in this time of COVID and Brexit, and how some countries are using, for example, the the salaries of teachers just as part of their GNP, and other countries don't use that because the system has been put on hold. So it's really interesting if you're into GNP. More or less on the BBC.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Indeed. All right. On that note, I think we will round it up here. Thank you, Peder, Gellert.
Yeah,
Pedersen,
thank you
very much
thank
for
you, everybody.
being part of it. Yeah, and we wish you all a good day ahead. And please do connect with us for any questions, comments, or future activities. We would love to hear from you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you very much. Same to you. Bye bye.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peder.
Thank you.